So I'm going to give you a quick background of why we decided to build this system. It's a system that presents as a toolbar. It's got a very thick client and a very thin server. And the basic goal, and the reasons it's called NetTrust, is to enhance trust on the network. And when we talk about enhancing trust, it's different from enhancing security, because security is more of a well-defined absolute. So we said, what are one of the big problems on the network? Is that there's not any signals. When you look at a web page, you only see what the web page producer wants you to see. The irony is that in the information infrastructure, there's such a tiny channel for you to evaluate if a particular website is in fact trustworthy or not. So so there's bad resources and good resources, and they can look the same, and I have some examples of that. And in economics, the way you deal with that is you say, well, we'll have signals. And so if you have two students show up and they're applying for a job, how do they signal to you that they're good students, that they really are going to work hard and excel? Well, they present to you their grades. So you have the 4.0 student and the 2.0 student. That's a signal that enables you to distinguish between the two parties, all right? Or otherwise, if all you could do was interview them, their willingness to show up and work hard would be unobservable. So a signal-dependent problem is one where the signal is meaningful, right? That is to say, this is a good student worth hiring. This is a lousy student not worth hiring. This is a good place to live. This is a bad place to live. And if you're going to trust somebody, and trust means that you're putting yourself at risk. Now, computer security and the social sciences have significant disagreements about the nature of trust. But across all domains, if I trust you, I am at risk if you misbehave or betray me. So trust is something that requires signals, because I can't trust everybody. I can't trust every website. I can't trust everybody to hold my wallet. I have to be able to evaluate people. And signals have to be, for the web, difficult to fake at the user interaction level. They should also not require training to evaluate. Now, that's kind of the ideal signal. Obviously, all of you, when you interview someone, you're going to learn how to interview. I'm sure that Google has some training that you go through and says, this is what we're looking for. We have a formal interview process. And right now, we do have some web-based resources, right? We have eOpinions. We have Amazon user ratings. I'm sure you saw in the news that eBay is updating its reputation system, because a trust system that only rates people as good, 99% of the people on the planet probably aren't really good. And it's a beautiful day, so I'll go with 95, but I'm not going to go with 99. So we proposed a system called NetTrust. So the idea is we want to add context to any kind of web experience. So we looked at the kind of context you can have. So this is, I don't know if you can read this, it says, welcome to Ladies Market. This is the Hong Kong jewelry market. This is Tiffany's, all right? So if you're in one of these locations and someone says to you, oh, here's a box of pearls. They're from Japan. You will have a very different trust response. And think about the wealth of input that's happening here, the kind of deep context you're getting that you don't get from a web page. This place, the people are moving more quickly. The booth presentations as compared to the marble Fifth Avenue Tiffany's presentation. Literally, the smells of the places are going to be different, right? This, you'll have, fried food and human smells. And here you're going to have that perfume counter, kind of flowery, cinnamony, musky, whatever it is, right? And so again, here is a physical offline example. So this is a bank in Berlin. It was started in 1854, and they can cash checks for you. You can go in there and you can purchase monetary instruments. You could take a paycheck in there and obtain cash. So you could buy a CD. You can do all kinds of monetary transactions. This looks very trustworthy, doesn't it? Whereas The check cashing place of Racine also does some of the same things that this bank does. You can pay your utility bills here. You could pay your taxes here. You could do money orders. But they're very different. Even though they're both doing the same function and they're financial functions, they're very different kind of trust environments, right? So, and here we have trust and context on the internet. Here we have two things that are arguably more different than the comparisons I've just shown you, because one is the front of a bank, right? Like the Berlin Bank, and the other is actually the front of an organized crime syndicate in Eastern Europe, right? So it probably wouldn't be that hard to distinguish between I'm in Eastern Europe at an organized crime meeting and I'm at my bank, because they're contextual. So we thought about what kind of context can you add? Well, obviously smell is right out. So we said we needed an economic signal that identifies in the aggregate good resources from bad resources. So frankly, I got a PayPal phishing, and I'm going to always, you know, my privacy and security settings are very high, blah, 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 and I always click on phishing links because I want to see what they're doing, right? I've gotten phishing links where I felt like forwarding them to the company and saying, I don't know who did their UI, but you should hire this guy because this is a very nice website. So it's very hard. You can't say, it's very hard to differentiate them. And then I get these wonderful emails from eBay that say, now, never, ever, ever, never, ever, never, don't do it. Do not click on a link in any email except this one. Click on this one. This one's great because we want to maintain that connection. For me, the real loss of phishing, if you think about it, the real value loss in phishing is not the money that's lost by people who lose money. Obviously, that's very significant. It's that the value of the email to web connection from organizations to customers is lost because they can't figure out if they're in a bank or in a meeting. They can't figure out if they're in Fifth Avenue or in a jewelry market, an open market. So what the difference is between phishing and malicious websites is temporal. It's very hard to communicate that on a website, okay? This website's been around for a long time. Now, they're also often geographic, but the phishing site that I showed you came from Columbia University's economics department. It was a subverted machine in the econ department. So if you had just said, well, you know, what's the location? Well, this is in New York. It's a very respected part of New York. So what we have to do is look at a website's history. How do you do that? Well, right now we say, we ask the web provider to tell us if they're good or bad, okay? And we can do that, we continue to do that. You can do it by ratings, and we embed a lot of ratings, and you can do it by regulation. I'm not really going to talk about regulation except for to say that it's incredibly geographically dependent, jurisdictional, and slow. And these attacks depend on speed, right? That's what enables them. The site goes up, it's up for 72 hours, it gets everybody's password, and it goes down. So here's our signals. And these all tell you that you should trust the website. In fact, they say very different things. There was a study done by the Berkman Center at Harvard, and they found that this seal in particular, see the click to verify, was positively correlated with exploited privacy policies and spyware. Okay? So if you see this web seal that says, click to verify, trust me, and there is an equivalent website, and how they determined the equivalent was it offered the same services and it showed up in the same rank in a search. With the same service, the one with the seal is going to be less trustworthy on the aggregate. So this is where we are now. So I found that picture, I thought it was cute. they're not really trustworthy, right? They're meaningless. They're just barking, right? And if you think about that, makes sense. Who says to you, you know, trust me? Is that what the guy at the Mercedes dealership says? No, he says, oh, a cup of tea, please? I mean, but it's the guy at the used car sales, right? The used car salesman who's telling you, oh, trust me, it was driven by an old lady. You can trust me. Usually when people say that, you can't. In this case, I'd like to say, we're going to drop that conditional. So who do you trust? Well, I trust Brandon, and I trust Brandon because we've worked together for a year, all right? And I know him. I've seen him perform in class. Albert and I have known each other now for about 2 years. And so we have social trust. And I have a high degree of certainty that neither one of them is going to do anything malicious to me. Now, attackers use that. Remember, the first time attackers used that very effectively was in emails. Because you get an email from your friend, hey, click on this. I love you. How could you not have clicked on that? And it worked. But we're not using social trust to help people defend themselves, to help people to understand and differentiate websites. So the basic idea is social filtering, that you share that if he likes the website, I'll like the website. Now, of course, social filtering is not at all new. The differences are, 1, you constrain your social network. 2, you have multiple social networks. 3, the information has perfect forward secrecy once you share it. So you kick somebody out of your social network. So those are the 3 factors that are different. And I'll talk about how it's different. Delicious is embedded in Browning, but it requires making your information public, right? I can't use Delicious to say to Brandon, look at this website. I have to email him, right? Here's my comment, and it's embedded in my email, because if I give it to Delicious, everybody has it. FishGuard requires explicit action. This is a bad website. And there's about a 2% error rate. Blogs, e-opinions, all the Amazon reviews, they can be anonymous. They rarely really are. They require multiple searching. We're going to go in a comparison with the social searching that we have and other mechanisms. And it's not validated. We'll show you how our ratings are validated. And it's also very concentrated, right? If you go to the blogs, you go to the top blog, right? How many people here read Ed Felton's blog, The Freedom to Tinker, right? There's probably, there's got to be 20,000 other blogs. How many read Schneier's blog, right? They tend to be very concentrated, so I can find out what Schneier thinks and what Ed thinks, and that's important. But in my own research group, it's a little harder. And I really want to know what's happening in my own research group. So we also embed centralized parties, because if you look at something like FishGuard, it doesn't perform consistently. And if you have social networks, and those social networks are highly correlated in things like age, education level, and experience use, if you don't have third parties, you're going to end up with self-validating, isolated social networks where up is down. You know, we're in Indiana. Indiana legislature once got tremendously incensed at the idiocy of the natural world, and you can look this up, passed a law that said pi was 3, right? So you wouldn't necessarily want, for example, those legislatures without a third party telling them this is really a bank, you know, it's really not 3. So one of the things we wanted to enable was open markets for third parties. We'll talk more about that. And the only verification is on updates. Like, you don't have to verify your identity to the server. What you do is you just assert an identity that's actually a number that's not linked to you. And I say, OK, I'm asserting this identity. It is, it's 16 hex. And here, that's my identity. And here's the key that goes with that identity. So it's not as if I'm asserting my identity as Gene, but I create an identity, and I bring in my social network. So I think I've talked enough about that. NetTrust requires variables that cannot be controlled by the attacker. The attacker cannot control the things NetTrust depends on. The attacker can't control my social network. The attacker cannot control my browsing history, okay? The attacker can control the images they present to me, and so they can do that. So how do we do this? How is this? Yeah, so I'm saying we're doing ratings, and you're like, oh, okay, ratings, boy, I've seen that before. We do actually 3 kinds of ratings and embed them in a single UI. We do implicit ratings. If you go to a website, you like that website. The implicit ratings are history-based, and the more you go to a website, the more you like the website. So I go to Google probably every day I'm online. I like the website. It has an implicit rating that's very high, all right? And the thing is, because phishing sites have, they told me not to go further than that, have very short lifespans, from 24 days to even the Rockfish gang, we're talking maybe 72 hours, maybe 96. That we have a delay so that when you first visit a website, it doesn't go up to 1. Because the worst thing would be to have it so that, oh, I'll send out this phishing email and everybody will go see it and they'll tell their friends that they've gone to see it and then it's trusted. So we have a temporal delay before it goes up that's based on the lifetime of a phishing site, and then it delays like this. So think about somebody you work with right now. If they asked to borrow $10 from you, you would give it to them, certainly, right? Because you'll see them at lunch tomorrow. Think about somebody you bump into on the street that you worked with 10 years ago, and they asked to borrow $10. No, you're not going to give it to them. There's this delay and decay, and that's exactly what the ratings do. If I go to this website constantly and stop going there, it should not give you the same rating as if I am continuing to go there. So this is the implicit rating. There's an explicit rating, which is how you get negative ratings, because in addition to there being an absence of information, there needs to be negative information. There need to be things that say, don't trust this person. This is a bad resource, right? You can call the Better Business Bureau, and they'll tell you good, and we can't say anything. But we all know that we can't say anything means bad. So these do not decay. So I realize that the people you hated in grade school, you probably don't hate them anymore, but still we don't decay explicit decisions. So the inherent results of this is we have, of the way we built it, is we have concealed identities, we build it on the social network and browsing habits, we have designed for data integrity, user-server authentication, and we are not stopping bogus account abuse. We're limiting the value of bogus account abuse. So this is a very different approach. We're not saying, you can never create a bogus account because we know who you are. We're saying you can create all the bogus accounts you want, but you can only talk to yourself. So it really doesn't matter if you do that, because you'll have difficulty moving into people's networks. So I've talked to you a lot about the theory of NetTrust, and now I want to show you I'm going to show you the toolbar instantiation. I'll talk a little bit about the architecture, and then I'll show you the new interaction that we have developed. And Brandon will talk about the ways that users have asked to utilize the data. All right, so this was our first toolbar. Things could be good, or they could be neutral. Later, things could get much more unhappy. As you see the guy up there, he's just like this. This face is actually throwing up, so that's a much stronger negative signal. We have a stronger negative signal here, right? You can explicitly rate down. And now this is the current toolbar. It's not showing up as well. We have positive and negative. These are the users really liked these, that you could just click thumbs up or thumbs down and have things go up or down. And then we've expanded our systems of ratings. Is it a bank? Is it family friendly? See the teddy bear? Isn't that family friendly? Is it alternative family friendly? And iAbolish is one I chose. This is a real company, and what they do is a real not-for-profit. They fight slave labor. So do they use slave labor? No, it's just, there really is lots of. So we use a user social network, as well as user-selected centralized authorities. The only one that's in there is the FDIC, and that is because in some cases, values can be contested, but in the US, you're either an FDIC-insured bank or you're not. And then you can add ratings in the little pop-up window. Bad site, buyer beware. Can you tell somebody from our group got ripped off on eBay? This was before they changed their reputation system. So there are a few core points of these. One, it's the social network, not the centralized network. And it's your own history. You have everything in your own history. Well, you don't get taken in by phishing, but almost everyone has in their own history enough information to identify a malicious site. You have in your own history enough information to identify a masquerading site. So, I mean, you knew I was Jean because I was introduced by Albert. Albert knew I was Jean because we've met several times. We recognized each other. If somebody had just shown up and pretended to be me, it would be easy for him to distinguish them, but difficult for you to distinguish them, right? So it's a complement, but it's not a substitute for search. It's about evaluating what you found. And here's the architectural overview. We have the toolbar and the rating engine that embeds in the social network. If it's green, that means it's really reliable and we're very happy with it. If it's yellow, it means it exists and we're not really happy with it. So we have third-party storage. We haven't got a published API for open third-party storage. Wasn't that scary? We have peer email invitations. The thing we don't like about the email invitations is that they give the server social network information. So we don't like that. The backend file system works very well. And as you can see from the toolbar, we're actually on the 3rd generation UI, and we've been through some testing with that. So this is the same thing done in rating. The ratings engine is done. We're doing a large-scale network test about user homophily with the dorms right now. We just started it. We've got 2 weeks of data. The question is, if you have a social network, how big does it have to be for you to have a reasonable expectation of them having visited a site before you visited the site? So what we're doing is we're stripping off identities other than machine identifiers and looking at web browsing histories that way. We have the toolbar UI. We have the social network. You still have to do some manual buddy ID entry because and I'm sure you know this better than I, there are so many different kinds of browsers and mailers that we don't have something that works universally. You have to cut and paste from the email you get from your friend. We have synchronization. The nice thing about synchronization is it means you don't go and download all your social network's ratings at one time. You log in, you download one person's, you wait a little bit, you download another person's. And we use one-hop proxies. So what's nice about this as opposed to some other systems, we're good with Sybil attack resistance because when you open a web page, we open a window and we look for activity. If you're a site that constantly updates, your rating's not going to go up. So we're pretty good with scripting attacks. We do server authentication on write. We do write authentication for peer records. We have a hash NetTrust ID to email address commitment that I'll show you in data structures that says that can be used for an authentication. I can say, here's a random number and my email, and that generates my NetTrust ID. But because we put the random number in there, if you come up and say, oh, this is Jean's browsing history, I can say, no, it's not. You just did an attack on the random number. So we have, and that gives us linking resistance and social network confidentiality. So we're doing mandatory these are just things we're working on. Synchronization works, but we don't have good time delays for persona change. And right now we do one-hop anonymization. We don't really use Tor. We haven't fully integrated the ratings part with Tor. The third-party rating assurance, we don't have our signed rating list up at this time. And we want to do a better job of invitation automation and validation, but there's so many platforms out there, we've only got it really working for one, and that's Mozilla. So I've been making these claims about what the system can do. Here's where some of the claims come from. We hash a random number in the email to get the ID, and that makes, so think of it as proof of work with invitation spamming. Are you familiar with proof of work? You know, Norse? Okay. So the idea is that you just make it more work. That I can't come out with one email and send to all of you an email with a virus that says, I love you, please forward this, right? Or I love you, and then you open it and you accidentally forward it to everybody in your box. What it does is it says if I want to claim to be Gene Camp, right, I've got to hash that with an email. So you can use common names like Sue, but because we make the social network size finite, and because information sharing is two-way, right, it's tit for tat, you're not going to accept every person into your NetTrust email. And if you do try to accept 51 people, one person needs to get thrown out. Right? So I can't come up with an email that says Gene Camp and email everybody in the world. One has to say Gene Camp, one has to say Albert, one has to say Sean. So it makes it harder to attack. The problem is that if you can do content analysis, it absolutely leaks identity, and you can do traffic analysis still. We started this design with the idea that you would have a signature linked to your browsing history, and that's how we do server authentication because it was easiest. And we decided in this case the non-repudiation feature of digital signatures is a bug because we want people to be able to have deniability. Imagine if you had actually looked at that Hannah Montana webpage and your friends found out. You definitely don't want to share some information. And if the system enables and makes the sharing of information easier, it should not also make that sharing non-repudiable. It should give you some level of deniability. So we're pretty well implemented. You can go look at the code base to check out the implementation status. We have the uncorrelated IDs, deniable histories, no credentials required for ratings. There's no credentials required for ratings download at the one that's in beta now. This is what we're working on. And this is why we ended up with a server that was an email server for our website. Is that what Alice sends to her friend is the random number and her email and a server and a nonce. And then the friend says, oh, is this, I'm going to get Alice's NetTrust identifier, confirm that it's random and email, the random number concatenated with the email and hashed, and the friend will send the same thing to Alice, and now Alice and the friend share a key. Now, because Alice and the friend share a key, they can use this key to protect the privacy of their history information. And then, if you look at the data structure, you guys know, you must know about the content scrambling system, CSS, right? Where they have a title key, and then every authorized player can decrypt the title key. Remember CSS? The programmer went to jail in the US, the Russian programmer, because he was exercising freedom of speech electronically, unwisely. The jury threw out the case. I know you guys remember that. Okay, so it's the same architecture, but we're not advocating making a federal case of it. So here's all the data with a one-time key, and then there's a buffer. So if I only have one friend, if it turns out that Brandon is my only friend in the world, even if you figured out this was my record, you couldn't figure out how large my social network was. And then for each friend, the key is encrypted in our shared key, which means if I get really mad, I get perfect forward secrecy because I throw his key out. The next time he goes to look for my key, the one-time key encrypted in our shared key, it's not there. He can still have access to the stuff he has in his client, but he can't update the material on the server. And because I write authenticate, he can't take last week's data either. So it gives him forward secrecy. One of the things we're doing is we're expanding the rating set for client-side farming detection. I'm very excited about this because this farming detection is impossible usually for an end user to detect. If somebody subverts your binding, you're in terrible shape. So what we can do is include hashes of server IP address and certificates in the history, and then that means you can detect if you're being redirected to a website that looks identical and there's a warning that comes up. And we're working on these rich text communication warnings because can you imagine, you're a brain surgeon, right? Somebody who's really smart, because I don't like the idea that users are stupid. So you're a brain surgeon, you're going to go actually operate on someone's brain. You want to go check your Gmail, and a little box comes up and says, you're at risk for being farmed. Please take appropriate action. And you'd say, OK, that was strange. Yeah, exactly. What's farmed? Don't these people know how to spell? What does agricultural products have to do with email? And why are they telling me to do something appropriate? I'm a brain surgeon. I'm going to operate on somebody's brain. So one of the things we're doing is we're making these movies, and that's what they are. They're little 30-second movies that come up and say, they kind of tell a story, and they say, oh, this is what's happening, right? You need to, and then, contact your IT person. If you don't have an IT person, contact, Symmetric, okay? They'll help you. This is how you can get, here's this, go to this set of instructions. So that's a big part of narrative risk communications. And we're working on that very heavily. And we have alternative interaction modes. So everybody saw my little window that popped up, and you can click yes or no. We've all interacted with those ratings windows and rated something good or bad. Well, I did a user test with some elder people because I thought I really want the naive populations that are getting phished to be able to use this. And so they said, or something not unlike that. They said, what's a buddy? What's a rating? Why is this thing on my internet? And then they said, I never tell anybody any information on the internet. And then farther down on the survey, they said, we shop 2 or 3 times a week on the internet. And the cognitive dissonance was about to make my head explode. And at the same time, trying to give them this ratings information, it wasn't working great. Let's just put it that way. When you pop up a box like that for somebody who's 67, their response is, oh, a box. Make it go away. So this is what we have. Yay! We call it the surfing with ambient trust. See the happy orb? So it takes all the stuff from the NetTrust toolbar, and it puts it in the happy orb. And so if it's a bank, and the FDIC says it's a bank, the orb is happy. And if Site Advisor says it's a bad site, the orb is bad. And what you do is when you start browsing, you put in your friends' emails, right? And that's your social network. OK, so compare that again to this rating. And the way you change your rating is you hit it. Thus, get it now? Surfing with ambient trust. So you whap it, and when you whap it, it changes color, basically. It goes from bright, the intensity stays the same, but the hue goes from a very intense green to a pure yellow to pure red. And as you whap it, it cycles through. So we are doing, yes?
I just want to point out that in adopting this user interface, you've also answered the next question, which is, what about trusted path? This is a great solution to the trusted path problem. There's no way for a website to seem to be rendering the orb.
Yeah, that would be, because it's completely client, right? So I'm so excited about this that I had to promise not to jump up and down during the presentation. I'm not like you to observe that I'm not jumping up and we're doing focus groups, and it seems, although the focus groups have been limited, we haven't done any analysis. The limited user exposure we have done, mostly resisted, is great. Can I hit it? So the other nice thing is people don't like to downrate other people. I mean, if somebody calls you up and says, can you give a reference for this person? Usually say either they're good or, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm not a reference for this person, right? Or, oh, what an interesting person. As human beings, we don't like to be negative, right? We like to embrace our joy. But on the other hand, if all you have to do is be negative, is swat the thing while it's frustrating you, then you'll get a higher quality feedback. So we're very pleased with our orb. And then before we did the orb, we did these other usability tests, and Brandon was the one who ran those tests, and he came up with some of the other innovations. I'm going to ask him to speak about them.
Good afternoon. First, I want to say I'm very proud of her for not pulling a Wallace and Gromit on us. Yeah. Hands everywhere, so that was great. But my part of this test, of this project, is actually usability. So I'm the user experience engineer for Gene. And basically what we did is last fall, we took a survey of a study class, so I-130, where we took 38 students in the class along with myself to participate in the test. So basically what occurred is over the 8-week period of time, we gathered information from all of these students that were instructed to install the NetTrust bar and then add me as a friend. And this would allow us to notice where they were traveling, what information they were providing for me in comments, and to see how the invitation system worked for them, which was great because then we had all three of the basics covered: the invitation system, the commenting, the rating, and then also the monitoring of your peer group. So after we had performed the test, we received a post-questionnaire that I handed out. We were expecting about a 25% capture rate because of the clients that we were using. First off, they didn't have a great buy-in. They were students. They weren't in the project. So we weren't expecting 100% capture rate. But we got a great turnout. We had 11 out of the 38 students perform, which was more than the 25% that we were estimating, which made me very happy because it gave me some great evidence of what we did with the usability test. So out of those 11, some of their comments weren't very good, but some of them were very insightful. And those insightful comments helped us to develop the current build of the toolbar. So things that we had received from the users were some great comments. Basically, users as a whole enjoyed using the toolbar. They enjoyed leaving comments and reading comments. They also enjoyed using the results or the feedbacks mechanisms that were instantiated with the toolbar. And then also, they liked to read what other ratings were from other people. And next, we also committed another user survey result evidence that showed that users wanted more control over their personal comments, which is something that we noticed that Facebook and MySpace had noticed also. They had to pull out some of their tracking systems because we wanted to make sure that users were in control of their comments and not that the website was forcing them to make them. So some requests that we got, some comments that we received from the users that we thought were very crucial to our building further implementations of the toolbar were that browsing by users would be a very nice thing for them to see. So basically, I have, say, 10 people in my current peer group. Out of those 10 people, I would like to search just Gene's comments. So then I could click on Gene's comments and sort through Gene's comments individually or by all the @plays. So I don't know if Gene didn't go over this, but you can have separate groups, @work and @play, or any other field that you want to build. Say I just want to see the people that I work with. And in that persona, I click on that persona, I can see all the comments that were provided by those people in that user group. And then I can also click on anybody in that user group and search those comments. That's something that all the users really wanted to do. And then next, they also wanted to annotate their searches, which is something that we were really intrigued by, and we wanted to build that into the further builds of the toolbar. Some major suggestions or minor complaints that we got from the users, they wanted to improve the invitation system because at this point it is a little difficult to comprehend for basic users. So basically I have to produce an invitation, email it to you, you have to receive it, you have to add it, then you have to produce one for me and do the same thing. Now the reason that we didn't get a lot of extra people from their peer groups, so the students were also invited to increase their peer group size by inviting their personal friends. A lot of students didn't do that for reasons of the invitation system was difficult for them to use. So if we can fix that, a lot of them said that they would be more than happy to invite more people to their peer group and increase their peer group, and in turn increase the amount of comments and ratings that they can receive and that they offer. They also want us to test different prototypes in the future of the usability of the toolbar. That way they can give us different comments. The persona management was a little difficult for people to understand. A lot of the users forgot that they could switch the persona. So they would log in, they would open up their Firefox browser, and they would be at their @play, and then they would just start searching through their ESPN or Google or Gmail, whatever their normal routine was. Unfortunately, the way that NetTrust works is it logs those ratings and those comments to that @play, and you can't change it. So say that they wanted to share them to the @work. Well, if you go back to Google, those ratings are already tied to your @play, and you can't switch them over to your @work, which is something also that they would want to change. They would want to be able to go back through their browsing history and then switch the ratings or the comments for the information that they provided for like the @play or the @work group. That way they could share their comments with more people or change the comments if their opinion has changed in the future. And now if you'll just go ahead and count through this, this is basically current value-mediated searching. We're trying to find labor-free chocolates. So we're now on the 3rd click, trying to figure out where I can order some chocolates. This is number 4. Number 5. So in order to get slave labor-free chocolates from any site online, it takes about 7 clicks. And that's if you know that iAbolish exists. Now, that iAbolish exists, not everybody knows that. So that may have taken them more clicks and more searches. So they may have wasted 20 minutes of their time to try to figure out where I can order chocolates from for, say, Gene, who doesn't support slave labor. So this is current value-mediated searching. So as you note, there's no extra comments for you. Now, if we go to the socially mediated searching and we actually filter all of our searches through the browser toolbar, then we can see that Gene really likes the brand chocolate. So I know that if I need to order chocolates for Gene, I can just go ahead and click on that brand chocolate because I already socially mediated the search. So I know that Gene likes those chocolates. So it makes it very easy for me to order those chocolates for Gene, as opposed to trying to find chocolates for Gene. And then next, we have third-party comments. Now, these third-party comments are something that we are currently testing that Gene showed you in the upper right-hand corner of the toolbar. And as you see, they're now posted next to the actual search itself. Now, these right here, as you can see, the iAbolish link and it's family-friendly. These two show me that this is probably a good place that I could order chocolates for Gene because I know that she supports family-friendly and supports the iAbolish website. So now Gene's going to go ahead and continue with a few more points beyond this.
So one of the reasons you don't have a lot of that value-mediated search is because even the most obvious values can be hotly contested, right? We picked iAbolish as the one to focus on because very few people will come out in favor of slave labor, right? It's easy. But there are much more complicated things like what's the definition of a family? What does it mean to be family-friendly? Most people think it means being friendly to all families and focusing on what makes a family, the child. Other people believe that family-friendly is a much more narrow thing. So you may have quite contesting definitions in many of these cases. Some people would say, you know, made in USA, that's exactly where I want to go. Other people embrace globalization. And there are also situations where you may not want to share your values. Okay, some values, I mean, look, organic, that should be easy, right? What's organic? Well, it turns out to be an incredibly hotly contested value. And for example, green hosting, now there are people who think green hosting is like friendly nuclear bombing. You know, the technology is the problem, you've got to stop all this. Now, obviously, I'm not advocating that, but I am saying that there are these hugely contested, the organic factory drapes definition is different than the eco-child definition of organic. This is a group that advocates local organic food, so that even if it's organic, you shouldn't eat it if it was grown far away from you. And you can definitely do that in California. There are inherently opposing views. So you see these on the street. You can see this is the big truth fish eating the little Darwin fish. And this is the Darwin fish. These people, they're contesting. They're inherently contesting. And you've got to let people choose their own inherently contesting rights. And then for every group of people that is passionate and serious about a topic, there's another group of people that think it's sheer whimsy, right? Do you guys know about flying spaghetti monsterism? Okay. It's a recent innovation in religion. There we go. So what does that mean? What is all the things I said are obviously true, but they're big cosmic social things, right? How do you take that observation and make it into architecture? And the way you do it is you say, it's got to be client-centered. It's got to be invisible. You can't, I'm going to argue with you right now. All right, so I typed this in, and I said, I'm going to say this at Google, and now I'm going to say it. It's got to be, it can't be a centralized search agency function. You can't say, okay, here's the Darwin, here's the flying spaghetti monster, and here's the hardcore Christian, because some people don't want to share that with you. If you're not out, how can you shop gay-friendly if you're not out and you're in an environment? You don't want to go and support exactly the people that make it impossible for you to be out. But you also don't want to go on the web and go to a centralized agent and say, oh, by the way. So we want to, it's important to enable dissenting values and silly values, just pure silly values, because that's what people want, and even profoundly offensive values. And if you are centered when you're offering those values, people will come to you and say that set of values that you are offering is offensive and you've got to stop it. Or a government may come to you and say that set of values which you are offering is prohibited and you have to stop it, right? So one of the things we like about it is we offer a third-party deniability that you can do this as a hidden service, right? That once you find it, you can always go and re-find it. And you don't have somebody who's filtering out values, right? I mean, you can be, something like, if you want to say, pick any religion except for maybe flying spaghetti monsterism, and there are passionate contest about what it means to be a good and faithful member of that religion. By making it client-side, you can step out of that entirely. And the search and the values are pulled down from one third party, and they're integrated by another party. So the thing we really want to conclude here is that there is no trade-off between security and usability to the extent that you think about the design as being user-centered. The trade-off from usability and security comes from two things. One, defining security as surveillance, and two, defining the security designer as omniscient. I know what values you want. I know what risk you want to take. I know what's a good website and what's a bad website, and you should listen to me about it. Users like having history and shared information. That history and shared information can enhance security and at the same time benefit usability. So we want to, the whole vision of this thick client that's now, it's a fully working system, is that we want to expand the concept of security to include elements of social trust, to acknowledge that the internet is part of our daily lives, and those definitions of security need to be part of our daily lives. And click here to see details of the certificate is not adequate. I think maybe 3 times in my life I've looked at a certificate. You know, just to see, oh, what is, you know, is this the hotel? Did this group of crypto anarchists of whom I'm deeply fond change providers, or are they under attack? You know, maybe 3 times, but I had to bring a huge amount of context to be able to make that judgment. But if you see a little happy glowing orb or a little sad glowing orb next to you, you don't have to make that context. So our goal is to inform user behavior when they're making decisions that they're uncertain about. And not only to do that, but to do it in a way that's appropriate for the user, to give them a toolbar if they want a toolbar, to give them a little orb with less detail if they want an orb. Now the orb, the toolbar is still there with the orb. You can go, you know, 2 layers into the toolbar. We don't prevent you, but we acknowledge you probably don't want to. And I'd like to acknowledge some people. In addition to Brandon, Alec and Kina graduated, Alex So, Camilo Vieco, Alan Friedman did the early modeling, Sri Ras Preeti and Farzana worked on the code, and Zach is building more orbs as we speak. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Any questions?
So just let me know.
The question, I'm sorry. Yes, trust. The way, okay, there's 2 ways. The question was the trust we're placing on the web page is comparable to PageRank. And the 2 answers to that question are, PageRank is what everybody thinks of a web page.
Sure, we went on parties last time, but I think, or last weekend, but I think it was just like, you know what I mean?
And so that's what the world thinks of PageRank. Now we know that PageRank, you keep PageRank secret because it can be, in some cases, manipulated, and that there are Google attackers. And it has very different, and one of the ways people manipulate it is through a lot of Sybil attacks, right? Masquerade attacks. It's going to be much harder to manipulate the social network because you have to be part of it. And so it's universal versus social network, right? So it's aggregate versus individual. And it doesn't deal with the particular trade-offs of subgroups. So if what I wanted to know was where to buy shoes, the aggregate answer in America is Walmart. Walmart sells 1 in every 8 pairs of shoes. So I haven't looked, but I suspect if you looked for, you know, at Walmart under a shoes search, it would have a huge high pay rank. I am guessing that almost nobody in this room bought their shoes from Walmart because we had very different sets of values determined by our individual social networks. So PageRank is the big aggregate number. This is the social number. It's more socially appropriate, and it's harder to attack via Sybil mechanisms. And because PageRank is centralized, and this is client-centric, this has the potential to address issues of farming and phishing. So that was kind of a long answer. But.
Yes, just another question about trust and actually what I do is different. Right? For example, you're seeing that Tiffany is more trustworthy, but you still go to ladies market shop. More people, much more people go to ladies market shop.
Yes, oh yeah, wait, I agree. Far many more people go there, and they pay a lot less too. Exactly. But if you were at the jewelry market and somebody said to you, you don't have to pay me anything now, we'll just open an account for you. Could you please fill out all your personal details and your social security number? You can say, no, I think I'll just give you my cash, right? The point is not that one is good and one is bad. The point is that they're different trust environments. And so when you get the Tiffany, you know, they hold it up, you know, and you say, yep, that's the one I want, I'll take it. You don't take it, you may not take it, you're not examining it, you're certainly not gonna rub it on your teeth, right? It's that your behavior is different and that you know how to mitigate your risk in both environments. There are obviously risks in both environments. One that you accidentally go into bankruptcy, and the other that, you know, you get subpar merchandise. And the pricing reflects that. which is why, you know, the jewelry market is, for many people, a far better place to shop.
So what's your research shown necessary size of social network?
We have, and this is all going to validate your choice to go into industry, after a semester and a half, just gotten human subjects permission to begin to do this dorm search. So we don't know that at this time. We have run a lot of models and simulations, and our assertion based on aggregate data is that you have to have a social network size of more than 20. But because we haven't been able to get individual data, we don't know.
Because you made a comparison at the beginning to the way economics makes decisions under market circumstances. So markets tend to only be effective if they're done. My intuition, although intuition is not obviously quite correct, is that 20 is a very small number.
Well, that
To be effective, and sort of, there was another mention of PageRank, and PageRank is sort of the economics of that. You've got lots of people sort of voting on what's down.
So you're saying that a market functions depending upon two things, depending on its size. And I'm saying a market can function very easily in a small size if there's more trust in that small size market, right? So if you have a high trust environment, you can have effective transactions. So what we're doing is leveraging this kind of off-network trust, this social trust, into network trust. So it combines both the wisdom of crowds, which is what you're referring to, that says the crowd should be big, and concepts of social trust.
Gene, I hate to interrupt.
Oh, we're over.
Booted out because there's another talk.
Oh, sorry. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming, and thank you for asking questions. And I'd love